Hey guys, we're going to be continuing sort of along the same lines that we left off of when we had our last class, examining the economic and political ideological differences between the North and the South. So what we're going to be talking about today is this idea of sectionalism. And in conjunction with things that we looked at last class, like the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, these are also elements dating back to the early 1800s that helped to contribute, like I said before, to the start of the Civil War, to the disunion that takes place in 1860. So let's start in 1831. Whoopsie. There we go. Let's start in 1831 with the first published issue of William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator. Now, in this first issue, Garrison himself wrote that the purpose of this publication is to advocate for the, quote, immediate and complete emancipation of all slaves, end quote. So that gives you an idea of just how potent a mouthpiece this particular publication was for the abolition movement. So now you have a periodical that appears on newsstands all around the country that advocates for the complete and total abolition of slavery. In that same year, you have Nat Turner's Slave Rebellion, which we covered a few periods ago. What this does is it helps to foster or continue to foster that psychological fear about a slave revolt or a potential slave insurrection. Now, think about that in conjunction with what ultimately happens with John Brown, and you can sort of see how this plays into the mindset that the North is actively trying through violent enterprise to do away with slavery as an institution. Excuse me. Throughout the entire 1800s, or at least, sorry, let me rephrase that. Throughout the first half of the 1800s, you also have the operation of the Underground Railroad, which gives us such notable American individuals as Harriet Tubman. But again, this process by which slaves were helped out in their journey from plantations in the South to free areas in the North, or in some cases Mexico, again, it underscores the abolition movement's commitment to attack the institution in any way possible. So you have a couple things sort of operating at the same time. You have the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. You have slave insurrections like Nat Turner's, and now you also have an organized system by which Northern abolitionists and their allies are actively breaking federal law. We move on to the publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852 by author Harriet Beecher Stowe, and this novel should be considered a vital anti-slavery tool because it really, just like The Liberator, served as a mouthpiece for the movement. But in this case, this fictionalized novel helped to bring the horrors of slavery into northern areas in the form of a novel as opposed to a periodical. The Dred Scott decision, which you guys are going to be taking a closer look at. So I'm not going to spoil it for you, but basically, if there's two major takeaways from the Dred Scott Supreme Court decision, one, it undermines the idea that slavery can be banned in certain areas, in other words, made illegal. So you might want to write that one down. I will repeat it. It undermines the idea that slavery could be banned in certain areas by law. And the second point that you should note about the Dred Scott decision is that it substantiates the legality of the system of slavery while actively creating a scenario whereby an African American cannot gain full citizenship. So more on that in the video that you guys are going to watch a little bit later. In 1858, you have the start of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, which was mentioned in the the Kansas and Nebraska video that we took a look at last time. But basically, this is going to be a debate between two ideas: the idea of states' rights, popular sovereignty, as echoed by Stephen Douglas, and then the idea of federal supremacy, the idea of containment of slavery by Abraham Lincoln. We then moved to John Brown at Harper's Ferry. You guys read about this, so this should come as no surprise, but this scared the pants off a lot of Southerners, particularly when they found out that John Brown was being supplied financially by individuals in the North. You're going to watch part of a video on Friday about this, or next week, and that's going to explain more clearly John Brown's role at Harper's Ferry in 1859, but that leads directly into the election of 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, a candidate that is feared in the South as one who will bring about an end to the institution of slavery, an idea that he does not respect states' rights, and this is what ultimately is going to precipitate South Carolina leaving the Union. That's the election of Abraham Lincoln. So you guys are going to go into more detail about a couple of these things. Dred Scott, you guys are going to take a look at an excerpt from a speech that Lincoln gave prior to the Lincoln-Douglas debates called the House Divided speech. And then to wrap up, you guys are going to start reading out of the White Trash book the entire chapter that has to do with the Civil War. And while you're reading that chapter, what I want you guys to do is to identify key phrases, sentences, ideas that speak to the issue of class and socioeconomic standing during the Civil War. All right, be good, and I'll see you guys on Monday.